In this presentation, you will learn about The Materialist Origins of State by Karl Marx. Marx's political philosophy is his view on the nature of political relations and the general law of its development, including political value, political system, and political ideal. In fact, as the research on Marx has suggested, Marx has brought great changes to modern political theory, which is to transfer the central field of politics from the traditional state and law to the economic field. By revealing the nature of power oppression of capitalist economy, a new field of political theory is opened up, and the core content is the theory of class and class struggle. Marx's political ideas, in fact, were laid down as soon as he introduced the materialist perspective for looking at the formation of historical societies. With his materialist perspective, Marx was able to show that the very first act of all societies was always economic, because human beings had to satisfy their everyday material needs much before anything else. Thus, this premise becomes the major theoretical perspective for looking at the social and historical development of societies from the point of view of their economic production and the division into social classes. From the perspective of theoretical value, Marx's political philosophy has achieved the unity of scientific and revolutionary nature, ideal and practical nature of political philosophy. The concept of people-oriented governance, the pursuit of fairness and justice, and the political ideal of human liberation embodied the advanced value concept of Marx's political philosophy. Marx's political philosophy, based on his optimistic understanding of human nature, and then attributed the root of human social conflicts to social production relations. As a theoretical system, Marxism has constituted the principal alternative to the liberal rationalism that has dominated Western culture and intellectual inquiry in the modern period. As a political force in the form of the international communist movement, Marxism has also been seen as the major enemy of Western capitalism, at least in the period 1917 to 91. In an early writing entitled Critique of Hegel's Philosophy of Right, published in 1843, Marx undertook a critical revision of Hegel's political philosophy, which eventually led to one of Marx's first systematic discussions of the state. Later on in his work on the Jewish question, Marx looked at the relationship between civil society and the development of modern state. In 1851, Marx undertook a historical study of the state in his work called The 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, and finally in 1871 in a work entitled The Civil War in France, he focused on the development of the French political state. Marx's basic conception of the state is stated in his famous piece Communist Manifesto, arguing that it is the repressive arm of the bourgeois and, as a set of institutions, takes on a wide range of functions corresponding to the needs of capital and or interests of the capital class. One can't find any distinctive theory of the state in Marx's studies. Rather, he uses a traditional conception of the state in his theory of the history. Marx thus analyzes different modes of production as well as forces of production that create different relations of production along a continuum throughout history. Marx places the state within the realm of superstructure in his famous base and superstructure metaphor. The fact that there is no explicit theory of the state by Marx has led many social scientists to evaluate his conception of the state from different perspectives. One of the most common ideas is that the state is the result of the existence of different classes in Marx's ideology as put forward by Giddens and Held. In general terms, Marx argues that classes are the creation of history and they will disappear in the future. Classes only arise when a surplus value is generated because it then becomes possible for non-producers to live off the productivity of others. So, one can inevitably expect to encounter a great amount of attributions to the emergence and significance of classes while studying Marx's conception of the state. Marx's work, The German Ideology, set in the context for outlining some of the historical as well as the materialist principles of state development. In fact, the assertion by Marx that the state has a historical origin is explicitly discussed in the 1859 preface to a critique of political economy, whereby he argues that the central features of the state grow out of the economic base of society and that the state is not independent of the economic foundations of society. Thus, within the scope of this reasoning, not only does the economic base give rise to the superstructure of the society and its institutional configuration, but as the productive system changes, so does the political and legal superstructure of the state. The scope and limits of the theory of history are more confined than Marxist state theory taken as a whole. This is because the relevant historical materialistic concept is the legal and political superstructure rather than the state. The theory of the state is contained within the theory of history to the extent that the state is contained within the superstructure, and it is so only partially. The superstructure might be something more than the state, and there might be more to the state than what is included in the superstructure. The superstructure consists of non-economic phenomena, but only such phenomena as are economically relevant. This means only those phenomena that are functionally explained by the needs or functional requirements of the economic base. Thus, non-economic phenomena are defined as superstructural only in virtue of being causally related in a certain way, that is functionally, to the economic structure. According to Elster, the central question in the Marxist theory of the state is whether it is autonomous with respect to class interests or entirely reducible to them. However, this way of presenting Marx's views is unhelpful because it suggests a false dualism or even antithesis. Elster's central question actually conflates two, and each is most fruitfully posed not in either but both and terms. Two broad conclusions can be drawn from Marx's perspective on state formation. First, economic production shapes social and class relations and hence the political structure of society. Second, economic production gives rise to a legal and political superstructure which comes to represent the productive relations. And therefore, taking Marx's materialist theory into account, the political structure of society and later the state always reflects the prevailing class interests and is never independent of them. Thank you for watching the presentation.